Well, a big welcome, everybody, back to another episode of Mighty Monday. This is your host, Mae Renfroe, and I hope everybody's had a great weekend and a good Monday. And I think it's going to get even better with our conversation tonight with Christina Custodio that I have on with me, my guest. She is a speaker, an author, teacher, photographer, and an encourager who has a gift for seeing God's hand in every detail of life. And she's the author of her book, When God Changed His Mind. And she's going to be talking about that tonight with us. And God used a terrifying ordeal in her life as a launch pad for her ministry,
Mhm.
leading others to find joy, faith, and hope regardless of their circumstances. So I'm excited about having this conversation tonight with you, Christina. And just a big welcome tonight to Mighty Monday.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be with you.
Yeah, I'm so excited about this. Like I get to talk to a lot of amazing uh, guests on here and what God's done in their life. And yours is a great one. I'm curious to know more about your book and the
Yeah.
story behind your book because it sounds like you went through what said a terrifying ordeal. So it wasn't a nice time in your life, but
Mhm.
you found got hope and joy and peace to continue on, and you're now sharing that with others. So
Yes,
yeah, I'm just
absolutely.
grateful. If you want to introduce yourself a bit more, get into your
Okay.
story.
Well, I live in Greenville, South Carolina with my husband and three adult children. Can't even believe I have young adult children. One is just got married in October. I'm like you said, I'm a speaker and a writer and a photographer and just really whatever God asked me to be at any given moment, which is kind of easy to do when you have ADHD. Switch switch things
Okay.
around. So
Okay.
I'm going,
Yeah.
as frustrating as that is, sometimes it's a gift. But yeah, what happened, it's been 9 years that really changed the trajectory of my life, especially, but really the whole family's. But I think I'll start even before that, if
Okay.
you're ready.
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
So I think it was about 2009 or so. I was at a women's conference and I was listening to whoever was on stage, and I heard in my spirit, Christina, you're going to do this. And I was kind of like, do what? And I heard that you're going to speak to women on a stage like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'd heard that voice before, one other time in my life when it told me that I was supposed to marry my husband. And that's a whole other story because I said absolutely not at that time as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
again, I was kind of like, I don't think so, God. I mean, what do I have to say? I don't have anything to say. I don't have a story like these women. They had amazing, if you've ever been to a Women of Faith conference, back in the day, they all had
Mhm.
amazing stories of faith and perseverance and, through all that they went through. And I didn't have any of that. I had a pretty smooth life, no big tragedies or struggles. So I thought, what am I going to talk about, God? Like, I'm a good Christian girl,
Mhm.
you know? So I kind of put it out of my mind as long hopes that God wasn't going to do something to me to give me a story.
Yeah.
And, every so often it would pop up, a thought in my head. I hope he doesn't do something to me to give me a
Yeah.
story. But generally, I didn't think about it. So, fast forward to 2015 when I dropped my son off at football practice. And it was about probably 40 minutes later, I got a call from a trainer who said, Isaiah's got a really bad headache. And you need to pick him up because he doesn't need to practice this way. They weren't hitting that day because they had a game the next day. And we knew it wasn't from being hit. So I thought, okay. And I thought, he's kind of dramatic. So, I'm sure he can wait a minute. It's just a headache. But something in my spirit told me, go get him. So when I got there, they picked him up off the ground. He was on the ground, and two people, one
Mhm.
on either side of him, they were practically dragging him.
Mhm.
across the grass into my car. And I thought, okay, come on, kid. Like it's a headache, you know? And I got out of the car to kind of see what was going on. And I realized pretty quickly that it wasn't a normal situation. He was
Mhm.
throwing up. He started throwing up. They sat him down before he got in the car because he couldn't stand. He
Mhm.
was throwing up. He was saying one word at a time. He was saying, hurt, hurt. And he kept saying, home. And then he finally said, help. And that scared me. And so we got him in the car and I very quickly got him to the emergency room where we ultimately found out that he had a severe brain hemorrhage.
Mhm.
And the thing about that is that I had always felt since he was a baby that he was going to die young. So
Mhm.
in that moment where we found out that his brain was filling up with blood
Yeah,
and
yeah,
he was dying, I thought, are you serious, God?
yeah.
Like, he's 13 years old. He was 13 years old. And I thought, what? We can't do this now. Like, please, no, he's too young and I'm not ready for this. Like we're ever prepared for
Mhm.
somebody to
Yeah,
die we love, you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
Um, so he had to have emergency brain surgery, and the doctor told me so many times in different ways that he could die because I found out later he was going to do the best he could, but
Mhm.
he did not expect Isaiah to live.
Mhm.
So, and that was hard. So I just said, well, okay, I got it. He could die. Will you please go save him?
Mhm.
Try to
Mhm.
save him. And we
Mhm.
had a room full of friends and family um, filling the room. We had a ton of people in that room with us. And there was a point where I left everybody and I went to the bathroom. I just kind of needed to get away. And I knew I needed to pray because that's what you do in those situations. But I didn't know how to pray because I believed that God had already told me. I felt like God had already prepared me for my son's death.
Mhm.
So I sat there and I had tears, but I think I was more in shock probably. And I just said all I could think of to say, and that was, God, change your mind, change your mind, change your mind.
Mhm.
That was my prayer.
Yeah,
Change
yeah.
your mind. I just begged him.
Yeah.
And when I came out of the bathroom, I felt perfect peace. That
Oh,
peace that passes all
yeah,
understanding.
yeah.
And I didn't have a sense of whether he would live or die. But I knew that God was going to take care of us regardless of what happened. I knew that if he died, my girls would be okay.
Mhm.
My marriage would be okay because, they tell you that's one of the first things that suffers is a marriage when you lose a child. And I just felt peace. And it was at that moment that
Mhm.
I knew this was going to be the story God had for me.
Mm.
And I didn't know if it was going to be mother's son dies and she has great faith, or
Mhm.
mother's son lives and she has great faith. But I prayed, obviously, that it was mother's son lives.
Mhm.
And he
Mhm.
spent many hours in surgery and he ultimately lived. They were able to save him. But, for the first,
Oh.
few days, we didn't really know. The doctor said, okay, we got through it, but he's still critical. He's stable, but um, when he wakes up, he may not know who you are. He may
Mm.
not ever, be able to walk or talk or do anything that he used to do. So we were facing that also.
Wow.
And, that's a hard thing to hear, but we were
Yeah,
just grateful.
sure.
And we had so many prayers. So really, even though I was scared, there was a lot of peace at the same time.
Mhm. Mhm.
So they said, he'll take steps forward, he'll take steps back, he'll take steps forward, he never took a step back. Every day we saw improvement. He had to learn how to walk and talk
Yeah. Okay.
and write and go to the bathroom and,
Yeah.
everything. It was like starting with a newborn. And today, he is a college graduate. He graduated last May,
Yeah.
and he graduated in 4 years. And
Wow.
he is actually currently working in the Disney College program in Orlando. So that was a
Oh,
really hard thing to let him go. But
yeah. Yeah.
through the whole thing, we could see God's hand
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
every single moment, every single day. God was present. And I could see it was such a gift because I could see why we were there, why God allowed us to be there. And people say, well, God has a purpose for all of these things. But I don't necessarily agree with that. I think God doesn't want any of these things to happen. He never intended for there to be death in this world. He never intended for there to be suffering. So for people to say, well, God must have done it for a reason, I don't think God does that stuff. I think he allows it. I think he allows
Mhm.
suffering. And I think
Mhm.
he allows it when he can, when he knows when he knows that there's a bigger picture, when there's a greater
Mhm.
good for the suffering.
Mhm.
So we have been grateful for all that we went through. And he stayed in the hospital for 44 days.
Oh, wow, that is a
Yeah,
long
it's a
time.
long time.
I
He
know, and
and I was
recovery.
there. I lived there with him. That was my home.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
yeah,
I was grateful that I was able to do that, to be there.
yeah.
So
Oh, that
it's
would have
been a
been
journey.
very special. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure, especially in those first couple of days when you're kinda told that he's not going to make it, it doesn't look good, and then what is his life gonna be like if he
Mhm.
does make it? So that would
Right.
be really hard because you're wanting him to
Yeah.
make it. You're praying, "God, change
Right.
your mind,"
Right.
you know, that he does live, but then you're
Mhm.
like, "Oh my goodness,
But
but
what
how
is
are we
that
gonna"
life? What will that life
Yeah.
look like? Yeah.
Wow, so that had to be hard. Well, how did you kind of work through that? Like
I just, you think you have faith until you go through something that actually tests your faith. I thought I
yeah,
had faith.
yeah,
I was
yeah.
pretty sure, but I wasn't sure until that situation where I
Mhm,
trusted
mhm, mhm,
God with Isaiah's whole life, which
mhm,
ultimately, was mine. And if you had told me, years before that I'd be facing the death of my child,
mhm,
I I would have said, no, I'm not gonna make it.
mhm,
Even just the
mhm.
thought of it, just I didn't think I could have any kind of sanity in the middle of any of it.
Yeah,
But God
yeah.
gave it, God gave it to me.
Mhm.
And he continued to show. I mean, we had even the first day we were there, our church family brought just a ton of food. It was like a church potluck. They set up a table
Aw,
and everything. And there were
wow.
other families there with, waiting for their children and surgeries
Yeah,
or who were patients in the hospital. We didn't have that. And we were
yeah.
able to share what we had with them. We were able to feed all kinds of parents and family members just because
Wow.
our church
Yeah,
family, was
yeah,
there to take care of us. And there were several things that we were able to do through our church family
yeah,
that it helped me see that God was working through it, and I was so grateful. And so it gave me peace also, just to know, okay, this is not for nothing. This is not going
mhm,
to go to waste, our time here. So I kept looking for other reasons. I kept, okay, who am I supposed to talk to? Who am I supposed to help?
mhm,
And I was just
mhm,
so grateful for that. And I also prayed that Isaiah would come out perfect. I believed it, actually. I
mhm,
prayed
mhm,
that God would get Isaiah out of the hospital perfect. I said, God, let him walk out of the hospital and let him be better than he was before. Let him walk out of here and onto a football field and be a big football star and have this amazing testimony. But that's not what happened.
mhm,
He was able to walk. but he didn't come out perfect the way I thought he should,
Mhm.
but he was perfect the way God intended.
Mhm.
He still
Mhm.
had weakness on his right side, like someone who had a stroke, and he still does to this day. But that kid is the most joyful human you could ever meet. I mean,
Mhm.
he
Wow.
and he would tell you today that it's okay that this happened
Yeah.
because he kind of like me, he thought he knew God, but after this, he felt like he really knew God, and he
Oh,
trusts him today with his whole
yeah.
life. He just
Wow.
continues to have joy, even though he
Yeah.
has, he walks with a limp. He has no peripheral vision to the right, but he is amazing. he just, and he's
Wow.
glad he wouldn't change. He
Yeah.
would not change it because he feels like he may not have gone down the right path.
Yeah.
Maybe I can't see that, but that's
Yeah.
you know
Yeah. But
that's
that's
what
kinda how he feels. And yeah, so he radiates with the joy of Jesus,
he
you know?
does. He really does.
Wow.
And he's got a
Wow,
big
it's
scar on his
special.
head that kind of reminds us of what God's done.
Yeah.
And people ask him, what
Yeah.
happened.
Okay, so he really has a lot of opportunity
He
to
does.
talk about the goodness of God and
He does.
how his life
Yes.
is a miracle and
Yes.
that God is so faithful and
Right. Although we were in
miracle
California,
worker.
oh my goodness, yes. We were in California once though, and the guy asked him about his haircut. He wondered,
Mhm.
what does that mean? Like, why did you
Oh,
get your hair cut that way? Kind of looked at him like, it's not a haircut.
yeah, okay, because some
It's,
people do stuff
yeah,
like that to haircuts,
sometimes,
right?
yeah, sometimes
Yeah.
people miss it, but it's okay.
Mhm.
But
That's
yeah,
right.
I'll show you actually the cover of my book, and you can
Oh,
see
okay.
the
Okay.
star.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I can really
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. I like to
yeah,
touch
so
it
the scar was from what? What
from
I
the
missed
surgery, from the
from the surgery.
emergency
Okay,
room.
okay,
So they really had to cut him.
okay, wow, they
Mhm.
really did.
Yes.
Because the hemorrhaging?
Yes.
Okay.
So his brain was really full of blood,
Wow.
and so they had to release it. They didn't know. At one point, they said that they may have to so they had to cut a part of his skull out and remove it in order to get the blood, and there were clots and all kinds of things in there. And they said, depending on the swelling of his brain, they might have to take that part of his skull and put it in his abdomen. So that would be like another little surgery because somehow that keeps it fresh. Our bodies are
Oh,
amazing, but he did not have
okay.
enough swelling to
Yeah,
need that.
yeah.
That was
Wow.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And he really did so well, and I know that it was all the prayers that people continue to pray, and we just believed God was going to do great things. And
Yeah.
I'm sure they thought I was a crazy mom sometimes because they would say, well, he was on a lot of medication to begin with, and I just felt like God was telling me at some point, he doesn't need this, he doesn't need that. And so there were a couple things that I asked them to take him off of, seizure
Mhm.
meds that I wanted them to take him off of. And they said, well, he could have a seizure. I said, well, he could, but he's never had one. And we're in a great place in case he has it. So please. And they would get so frustrated with me and they'd say, well,
Yeah.
this could happen. I'm like, but God didn't say that. So
Mhm.
let's see. God's bigger.
Yeah.
And I know I'm
Wow.
like this crazy Jesus freak lady, you know. I think some of them got it, but yeah, they were a little. And then there was another time when there was another medication that would stop spasms, kind of muscle spasms in his leg. Because when he started doing physical therapy, his leg would shake like really
Mhm.
a lot when he'd set
Mhm.
it down. And so they had him on a medication for that. And I wasn't trying to go crazy and take him off of everything at once, but it was one day when I don't know where I went, and I came right back, and the nurse had tried to give him this medication, and he took everything they gave him every day. And this is probably maybe 3 weeks in, and he refused to take it. And I walked in, the nurse said, "He won't take his medication." And I said, "Well, don't give it to him." And
Mhm.
he just was kind of, like, what in the world? And when she left, I said, "Isaiah." And he couldn't talk at this point, but he could understand, and he would
Mhm,
nod and
mhm,
shake his head.
mhm.
And I said, "Why didn't you take your medication?" I said, "Did God tell you?" And
Oh, wow.
I said, "Okay,
Yeah.
then you're not gonna do it." And they were really upset with
Yeah,
me
yeah.
because I would not let them give it to him anymore. And they said, "Well, he could have this shake for the rest of his life." I said, "God didn't say that." And I said, "I don't think he will." And
Yeah,
guess
yeah,
what? He doesn't have a shake.
yeah.
And he's not on any medication today.
Yeah,
So, and he wasn't when we left the hospital.
yeah. Oh,
So,
wow.
God just did all kinds of really cool things. Yeah.
Yeah, lots of miracles right there, and so what a
Yes.
like a
Yes.
testimony that was to the doctors and nurses right there in the
Yes.
hospital too, right there.
Yes, I believe
Yeah,
so. And
yeah,
we still keep in touch with some of
good.
them. One of them, especially his speech therapist that he had, has become a friend, and she's just precious. And
Yeah,
uh, it's many, many blessings came out of a very difficult time.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
That that's wonderful. That's how God works. I love
yes. And I
how
think
God
we just
works.
have to let him,
Yeah,
instead
yeah,
of fighting, just trust him that
yeah,
whatever
yeah,
he has, good or bad,
yeah.
what's bad in our
Trust
minds,
Yeah,
that it's
yeah,
gonna be
trust
okay.
and then just believe,
Mhm.
that he can, do
Yeah.
all things, and in Romans 8:28, how it says that he works all things out for good to those
Yes.
that love God.
Yes.
And um, it doesn't have to look good, right? To
Right. Right.
so, yeah. Is there particular verses that really helped you, spoke to you that you stood on, like promises and stuff that
Yeah,
you
I actually have my Bible open to this. It was Isaiah 40:31. I think a lot of people know this one. It was just everything to me. It says, "But those who trust," well, let me start at verse 30. "Youths may become faint and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who trust in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not become weary. They will walk and not faint." And that applied to me and my faith and my family. And that, as hard as it may get, as tired as we may be, God would provide the strength and the courage to do what we needed to do. And He absolutely did. And then I thought about Isaiah. I just wanted him to soar, I wanted
yeah,
him to
yeah,
run. And
yeah,
he can run. It's not pretty, but he can
yeah,
run.
yeah,
Yeah. It's there was so much scripture that became meant more to me during that
mhm,
time. I mean, there's
mhm,
such a comfort just knowing that God is there. Whether, yeah, it's hard. There are a lot of difficult things that we have to go
mhm,
through, but just when you trust God, then you don't then it becomes a little bit easier. Not easy, but you can do it. You know that you can do it. If
mhm,
you just
mhm,
trust that whatever direction he takes you, he's going to make it okay eventually.
mhm.
Just like you said, Romans 8:28, all things work together for good. Not, all things will be good.
Yeah,
All things work together for good,
yeah,
for the good of those who love the Lord. And I didn't know that I loved God that much. I wasn't even sure, I'll be honest. Like,
yeah,
I I never really understood when people would say, "Oh, I love the Lord," because I felt like I wasn't. I didn't do enough good. I didn't
Mhm.
show him enough
Mhm.
that I loved him, because I still, I think, was counting on what I did, not that I was offering the best I could. So I think it was at that time
Mhm.
where I realized all I can give him is my best, and I do love him, even if I don't love him perfectly. I do love him, and I'm so grateful that he loves me
Mhm.
and has never left me and promises that he never will. That stuff just becomes more real, I guess,
Mhm.
when you go through things like that. And I know when we talked a little bit before, you told me about your son who
Mhm.
you lost. And so
Yeah.
I imagine that you get that even more so than I do, because you're sitting up here talking to me. And
Yeah, yeah, it was a very hard time for us, but I felt God so real,
Mhm.
for me and for us at that time like I never have before,
Yeah,
and yeah, I really, um, I don't know how to say, just really found him to be who he said he was in scripture.
yeah,
You can read about it, but until you was experienced and you're like, "Yeah, he
yeah,
is who he says he is." That peace that he gives us that surpasses all human understanding. That's exactly it. Well, I couldn't even begin to describe to people the peace that I had when I
right,
shouldn't have had peace. Everything is like world is shook up upside down, and
right,
yet I had a peace that I was standing on and a hope that I clung to, and people around me could see that. Yeah, at the funeral, someone had commented to someone else that I guess really didn't have that faith, but they
yeah,
they had seen that in me,
mm,
and so it's all God. It's
yeah.
all God.
That's a testimony,
Yeah. Mhm.
because I
Mhm.
mean, like I said before, in facing that, I can't. I had said before, if I lost a child, you would have to kill me.
Mhm.
Those words came out of my mouth, or even,
Mhm.
facing
Mhm.
the potential
Mhm.
death. So I know that that is only God. The fact that you are able to sit up straight and
Mhm. Yeah.
talk about it and encourage others is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
And I struggled a little bit at some point, where, because I felt guilty, because I
Mhm.
thought, but God, what about the other mother's sons? What
Mhm.
about the ones who didn't get to keep their sons?
Mhm. Mhm.
Why did I get to keep mine? And of course, I was grateful, but I feel like I got a better perspective during this time of why bad things happen to good people, right?
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
one of the biggest questions
Yeah.
people ask.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not because it doesn't seem fair. But I remember it was not long after I think we got out of the hospital, or maybe it was right before we left. There was a little boy who, the same thing happened to him as Isaiah. He had a ruptured blood vessel and brain bleed, and he was fine. There were no he didn't ever lose his speech or any movement, or, and
Mhm.
I was kind of
Mhm.
mad for a second.
Mhm.
Like, well, why does he get out of here with nothing wrong with him? But then
Mhm.
very quickly God kind of spoke to me, well, your son got to live, and there are other mothers whose sons
Mhm.
didn't live. And then I thought, there's always someone
Mhm.
with more. There's always someone with less. There's always something that has better. There's always someone who has worse. And
Mhm.
so we all end up kind of in the same place, right? And having to trust, like you said, that God is who he says he is, and he sees the big picture. Maybe we wouldn't have as big of a testimony, because maybe I wouldn't have shared, maybe I
Yeah.
don't know what I would have been like if I had
Yeah.
lost my
Yeah.
son. I don't know if I could have done what you
Yeah.
do. But I
Yeah.
think God knew the best outcome for who I am and who
Yeah.
Isaiah is and who the rest of my family is. Um, and that's kind of how I have to see it. He knows the
Yeah.
best
Yeah.
thing for each
Yeah.
one of us. We all have a different story. And we kind
Yeah.
of just have to accept what that is. I would have loved if Isaiah had no limitations at all. But what a testimony that that kid has so much joy, even through his struggles.
Yeah.
Nothing can stop him.
Wow.
It scares me sometimes because I'm like, I don't ever need to do that. But he has so much faith,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
so
No, that is just beautiful.
yeah,
And all God's ways are perfect. There's no
yeah,
no mistakes. And
yeah.
yeah.
I don't know how anybody does it without him.
Yeah.
I
No,
just
I
don't
don't know.
know. I
Yeah.
can't imagine my life without the faith I have. I would be, I don't know that I'd be here at
Yeah.
all, you
Yeah.
know? Because
For
what
sure.
hope could you possibly have?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Without God, yeah. Knowing him. For sure. Yeah, I was wondering if would you be able to explain a bit about the title of your book? So I think I mean, we've probably through the whole conversation we have, but
Yeah.
people wonder when God changed his mind. So does God change his mind? And if you want to
Oh, yeah.
maybe get in that
So
a little
some
bit.
people don't believe that God changes his mind, right? But there are several instances in the Bible where it actually says that God changed his mind. But I don't believe that he literally changes his mind because he already knows. He
Hmm.
knows, he goes before us.
Hmm.
He knows what's going to
Hmm.
happen before we were born. He knew what was going to happen in our lives. What I believe is that it's for us. I think that for me, it was maybe a test of my faith, my individual faith, that I believed that he could and that if I had enough faith that maybe he would find a different path than what I thought it would be.
Hmm.
And I think there are times when it could go either way.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think about in Joshua where, you know, they had all of these nations to defeat so that they could receive the land that God promised them. And there were times when God would tell the Israelites, I have delivered this nation into your hands. He would say, essentially, it's done. But all they had to do
Hmm.
was be obedient. He's like, just do this and this, or just do this one little thing, and it's yours. He had
Hmm.
already determined that it was, but they still had to
Yeah.
prove their
Yeah.
faith. And I think
Wow.
about that in these situations, and I read there are times when they didn't have faith, even though they saw all these things that
Yeah.
God
Yeah.
did, all the
Yeah.
times he delivered them. There were times where they didn't trust, and he had already said, I've delivered this nation into your hands, but they were full of fear and they didn't trust him. And so they didn't win. They weren't able to defeat the
Yeah.
armies. And I think about how many times do we miss out on our blessings because we don't have faith, because we don't trust him. And he's like, all I need you to do is
Yeah.
this one little thing, or say this prayer to show me that you
Yeah.
trust me. And I never thought about that until recently. Like, it is done. And
Yeah.
somehow I grew up in church and knew the Lord's Prayer, of course, by heart my whole life practically. And I never understood the line, Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And I
Mhm,
realized, I mean, this is like in the last few weeks, I realized
mhm,
I'm 51 years old. And I just realized that's what that means. He's already willed certain things to happen here on earth. He's like, it's done, but you still need to do this thing.
mhm,
And I thought, oh my goodness, that's what that means. After reading in Joshua, how many times he said, I have delivered this
mhm.
nation to your hands. And I thought, okay, that's what that means. We have a little
Mhm.
responsibility, though. We've got to have
Yes.
faith,
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
to believe that he can do it
Yeah.
and that he will
Yeah.
do it.
You have to
So
believe. Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of maybe what happened. in that
Yeah.
bathroom when I asked him to change his mind.
Yeah.
And that just, God gave me the title of that book based on my prayer. And
Yeah.
then it's also
Yeah.
kind of a double meaning because he changed Isaiah's mind. Isaiah's mind, his brain is not the same. Mm.
Okay. Yeah.
So I didn't realize that
Yeah.
until
Yeah.
probably a couple years after I chose that title. God knew. I didn't know.
Okay. Wow.
It's
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah.
Oh, isn't that something? Wow.
Yeah. God is amazing. Every
Yeah.
day I'm
Yeah.
amazed.
Yeah. Wow. That's neat. And yeah, sometimes we can focus on the negative and see, it's a bad thing, but if we can see what he's doing through that, so
Right.
um and so sometimes it takes these negative things to produce
Mhm.
positive things
Yeah.
in our life, right? I
Right.
was just thinking that recently. It's like sometimes we have to go through things that we would say are negative to seem bad,
Right.
but the things they produce in our lives
Yeah.
are
Yes.
very, very positive. Yeah,
Yeah.
very good, very
Which
fruitful.
is how I now get the verses in James. It says, "Consider it pure joy whenever you go through trials of many kinds, because it produces perseverance." And,
Yeah,
you know, it gives us opportunities to
yeah,
grow. That never really made sense to me. Like,
yeah,
why would I be joyful about struggles? But I
yeah,
get it. I get it.
yeah, yeah. Because then we have new passion for for others going through things, or empathy and the things that we maybe normally wouldn't, because we haven't walked that road and we don't know how it feels, and we haven't um had to kind of wrestle with that or with God,
Mm.
or we're and we just don't know, right, until we've
Right.
gone through these things. Yeah.
Right. And it's a blessing, even though we wouldn't
Yeah.
think so beforehand.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Oh, I
Yeah.
love that. Wow, I've sure enjoyed you sharing with me. Yeah, so you are like the speaker, author, teacher, and a
Mhm.
photographer, all these things. So yeah, you've got speaking events coming up, because that's kind of how we got connected.
Yes.
Yeah,
The new conference.
yeah, and that's how I heard that you were going to be a speaker there, and
Uh-huh.
Kim Dodson, who is organized that and going to be a speaker.
Yes.
I seen you. I was like, oh, I would like to have you on. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's coming up, and so
Yeah.
that's really exciting.
I'm looking forward to that. I'll be
Yeah.
at also in Washington in April, the Northwest Christian Writers Conference. I'll be speaking
Cool.
about
Oh,
microblogging, which
wow.
is what I do. Each day I share
Yeah,
whatever it is God puts on my heart on my Facebook page. Um, and I've got another speaking. I've got a few things coming up, but all over the
yeah.
country. So
Okay, well,
it's,
that's exciting. Good, good.
yeah,
And so, yeah, we will definitely share your information where people can connect with you if they want
yeah,
you to come speak and to
yeah.
share about your
Love
book and
that.
your story and why you have so much joy,
Yeah.
what you've gone through. Yeah. Well, as we close, is there anything else that you really want to share with someone going through this, kind of something we haven't hit on, something else that
I think
would speak
just,
into someone's life?
yeah, just really lean into the Lord whenever you go through trials. We sometimes just take the position of woe is me, and we scream and we cry and why, and which emotions are important, right? God gave us emotions, but sometimes we just assume the position of
Mhm.
grief when we're going, and we've got to grieve, we've got to go through that, but sometimes it's just an automatic reaction to struggles. And if we could really lean into the Lord and look for him in all of it, look for what he has. How many times have we missed some really amazing lessons and things that he has for us, beautiful, beautiful messages,
Mhm.
because we just assume the position of sorrow. So
Mhm.
I just think that there's so much more hope that we can find through whatever our trials, and it's okay to be upset, and that God's upset too. He didn't intend
Mhm.
for any of this, like I said in the beginning. And
Mhm.
so, but I think he has so much more than what we see in store for us.
Mhm.
So much joy can be found. Not like
Mhm.
we're happy about our situation, because nobody's happy. about struggles, but happiness and joy are two different things. And we can
Yes.
still find joy in the Lord and see just what blessings you have. Look around, look at
Mhm.
other people that you can bless. Look at, you know, somebody that is waiting for you to be a part of their lives. People you meet in the hospital, people you meet on the street, whatever it is.
Mm.
God is in every single nook and cranny of our stories, and just to look for him and never forget that he is for us. He loves us
Mhm.
regardless of who we are, what we've done, what we'll do, what we've been through.
Yeah. Yeah.
This isn't punishment. What's happening, this
Yeah.
hard thing is not punishment.
No.
He
No.
doesn't
No.
want any of these things for his children. So just
Mhm.
to, look at every situation with the possibility for joy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, well said. I love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, we're just seeing these things as stepping stones and growing in our faith and growing closer to God and just limitless what He can do through
Yes.
these things, right, in our lives.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you may
Yeah.
find yourself somewhere you never expected. Like, I never expected this is where I would be in my life, but I'm grateful. It's not easy all the time,
Yeah.
but I'm grateful. I'm honored to be able
Yeah.
to share what he's given me. Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. Great. Good vessel for the Lord. Yeah. Okay. Well, it's been a joy to talk to you,
Yes.
Christina.
Thank
And
you so much for having me. It's been
well, thank
wonderful.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. All the best to all the rest of your ministry and all the things
Yeah.
you're into and your upcoming speaking events. That's great.
Thank
All
you so
right.
much.
Keep up the great work and take care. God bless.
Okay. Blessings to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And everyone else have a great week and I'll be back here next Monday. Okay.